Sometimes I wonder why I go on loving you this way when I'm not sure that you are sure that you will stay. Sometimes I wonder why I go on hurting like I do. I guess this heart ain't very smart. It wants no one but you. But when I lay in your arms, child, it's easy pretending this is a real fairy tale with a happy ending.
Hello, I'm your host, Cleophelia Meek, and welcome to The Pursuit of Happiness. Our topic today is grief. Our guest is Blythe Liederman. She has a master's degree in psychology. She is a psychology instructor at Los Angeles City College and a bereavement counselor at Stephen S. Weiss Temple, where she currently runs a group for young adults who have lost their parents. Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you.
Now, can we first start off by let's tell the audience, what is grief?
Well, grief is the natural way of working through the loss of a loved one. And it's a process, an ongoing process, and that means it takes time. And I'd like to emphasize it takes lots of time. This is something that we don't realize. Grief is as natural as crying when you're sad, or as natural as sleeping when you're tired. Simply put, it's nature's way of healing a broken heart. Yet despite the fact that it's natural and actually essential, it's necessary for the future physical and psychological well-being of the grieving person, most people do not grieve. They avoid their grief.
Oh, so why do so many people avoid their grief and kind of go on living as if nothing significant has happened? Why do they do that?
Well, basically for two reasons. The first is that we live with what is called a death taboo in our society. And that means that we are afraid to talk about death, to think about it. It's something that we just want to avoid. It hasn't always been like this. Up until about the 1900s, death was very much a part of life. Loved ones died in their homes with their families surrounded at the bedside. But with the emergence of hospitals, doctors and nursing staff took over the family function of helping their loved ones die. And as that happened, death started to take place behind closed doors. And therefore, people became alienated from it. And that's why we have a death taboo in our society. People don't want to deal with it, period. The second reason is because we live in a society that does not allow for the expression of feelings. And as a matter of fact, we live in a society that does just the opposite. It teaches us to suppress our feelings, not to feel. And basically that happens from the time that we're children. We're taught not to feel certain feelings, and so we push them down, we bury them, we pretend they're not there. And so we feel very afraid of feelings and uncomfortable with them. An example I could give is just happened like 2 weeks ago with my son Tanner, who's 3.5. the last year he's gotten very friendly with our neighbor's cat. And the cat died 2 weeks ago. And the neighbor buried it in her backyard. And I told Tanner that, you know, I think the name was Misty. Misty had died, and Misty was buried in the backyard. And Tanner wanted to go over and see Misty. So we went over, and I asked the neighbor, you know, can we see where Misty is buried? And she said to Tanner, now Tanner, I'll show you where Misty's buried, but don't cry.
Oh.
Okay, don't cry, Tanner. You promise you won't cry? And of course Tanner said, oh no, I won't cry. And at that point I expressed to her that you know, we need to cry when we feel sad, and that I told Tanner that if he felt sad he could cry.
Mm-hmm.
But we teach children from a very early age not to feel their feelings, and especially anger and sadness are two in particular that we teach people not to feel. And so in the face of loss and death, with such overwhelming feelings, people don't know what to do with that, and so they avoid it.
Yeah,
They basically just want to pretend like everything's okay.
I know. I see a lot of people now. I just watch people, and they seem like they're angry. You just walk around like zombies or something.
Yes.
And I know that they have that. What they're trying to do is they're trying to hold on to all these feelings. Especially you have
Yes.
adults, and they got walking around real puffed up, and they just trying to hold on to
Yes.
these feelings before they explode.
Exactly.
But tell me.
I just like to say, you know, we're like containers of feelings that are just waiting to explode. And if we don't let them come out little by little, that can happen.
Yeah. So how can we help someone who's grieving? How can we help them? How can we help them grieve?
Well, I've selected a poem that I'd like to read that I really think captures the essence of what the grieving person is feeling and what they need, especially during the first year of their loss. It's untitled. I'd like to read it. Don't tell me that you understand. Don't tell me that you know. Don't tell me that I will survive, how I will surely grow. Don't tell me this is just a test, that I am truly blessed, that I am chosen for this task, apart from all the rest. Don't come at me with answers that can only come from me. Don't tell me how my grief will pass, that I will soon be free. Don't stand in pious judgment of the bonds I must untie. Don't tell me how to suffer, and don't tell me how to cry. My life is filled with selfishness. My pain is all I see. But I need you. I need your love, unconditionally. Accept me in my ups and downs. I need someone to share. Just hold my hand and let me cry and say, my friend, I care. And so I've chose this poem because I think what the grieving person needs is just someone who cares and who can really listen to them without judging or advising or telling them what they should and shouldn't be doing.
That's so powerful.
Yes, yes.
It's straight to the point. And I remember once when a friend of mine, his mother died, and I didn't know anything about grief, nothing at all. And I thought he should have been over it a couple of weeks, you know. So I did all the wrong things, and I'm so happy that you came on this show to share with the public these things, because it's very important. It's so many people dying every day. It's just lots of people dying, and no one talks about grieving and stuff like that. This is wonderful that you come on here. And for those who just joined us, our topic is grief with Professor Blythe Lederman. Now, tell me, what should we not say to someone who is grieving?
Well, a lot of people have very good intentions. They want to help, but they really don't know how to connect with the person who is grieving. And so they say a lot of wrong things, and I'd like to go over a few of those with you. Okay. What you don't want to say is,
we're going to go to the board now, huh?
Yeah, I'm looking at the board. What you don't want to say is, your loved one is in a better place now. First of all, we really don't know where our loved one is. And so even so that, may make us feel better temporarily, it really doesn't help. And second of all, the best place for the person's loved one to be is right here with them. And that's how they're feeling.
I know. I told somebody that once, and they almost broke into tears. And and then I felt offended because, you know what I'm saying? Here I am trying to comfort this
Right.
person, and this person just jumps up, feelings are really strange.
Yes, and people who are grieving are very sensitive, and just anything can break them into tears.
Yeah.
Another thing that you don't want to say is something like, at least you had them for 82 years if your loved one, was older. The reality is, if you have a beautiful, loving relationship with someone, time is endless. You want them here forever. It's never long enough. Also, you don't want to say, at least they are not suffering now. The person who is grieving is suffering, and they're feeling, well, sure, my loved one isn't suffering, but I am, and it hurts, and I want them here.
That's what the doctors say on television. Every time somebody dies, when I see these movies, they say, well, they didn't die, they died painlessly.
Right.
Yeah.
But when our loved one dies, their suffering does end, but ours begins. And so that's important for us to acknowledge.
Yeah.
Excuse me, a lot of people will say, everything will be okay, just don't think about it too much. And of course, this is impossible. Everything is not okay. And that's all the person is thinking about, is their loved one and how miserable they are and how awful they feel. And so that really takes away from the reality of what's happening in their life right now.
You know what I usually say to people when they lose their parents? I say, well, at least you had parents. I never even had parents. And I know how, now I know how cruel it is. But to me, it seemed like, well, you had parents.
Right.
I never had parents.
Right.
So,
of course. I mean, it makes sense in the right context, but when someone's grieving, it's like, well, I want my parents here even longer, because
so I have to acknowledge their feelings and just let my feelings,
right.
yeah, because it's their loss. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to try to be there for them in the moment. Last thing that you don't want to say is, be strong, don't cry, which a lot of the people in my bereavement group hear this. People who are grieving don't feel strong, and they don't want to be strong. They're weak, and they need to be nurtured. And don't cry. Well, how can they not cry? They've just lost a very special person in their life, and they need to cry.
So if I was grieving and someone told me, be strong, don't cry, what should I tell them?
Well, what is better for the person is to acknowledge the feelings and to just deal with their pain. Instead of pretending that it's not there, we need to face it and to be real. So some of the things that we can say are, again, I'm looking at the chart, I'm so sorry, this is a great loss. And again, just acknowledge the loss.
What should I say to someone? I meet a lot of people, and I don't know their loss, and like if you go into a bar or something, and somebody's in there drinking and they're grieving, and if they say, well, I just lost my father, what should I say to a stranger that who's grieving?
Well, you can ask them to tell you a little bit about them. Tell me a little bit about your father. What kind of a man was he, and were you close? What type of a relationship did you have? Do you miss him a lot?